All right, let's get started. Welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us for GALT's first webinar in our summer webinar series. I'm Katie Doris. I am the Communications and Outreach Manager for the Georgia-Alabama Land Trust. A little bit about the Land Trust for those of you who aren't too familiar with us. We are a nonprofit land conservation organization that currently protects and stewards over 500,000 acres in the Southeast. So that 500,000 milestone of acres protected is a recent achievement, and we're really excited about that. So if y'all want to learn more about our work or ways to support us, you can check out our website. I'll drop that in the chat. I'll also drop my contact information in the chat. If anyone has any questions about GALT, feel free to reach out to me. A few housekeeping things before we get started. We will be recording this webinar, so if y'all want to return to any of the information that is gone over today, you can find it on our YouTube, and I will also send out the link to that to everyone after via email. We will have time for questions at the end. So throughout the webinar, if you want to drop questions in the Q&A, we'll monitor that. And then at the end, we'll try to get to everyone's questions. But also I wanted to thank our speakers today too. We have Olivia from the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources and Kevin from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. So we really appreciate y'all's time and sharing your expertise with us. So I will hand it over to you, Olivia.
Thank you, Katie. Oop, wrong button. Let me go ahead and get my presentation up for everybody. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Olivia Sciandra. I am the Wildlife Health Program Coordinator for the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. It is a very long name for our department, and I'm within our Wildlife and Freshwater Fisheries Division. So it's a pleasure to be able to talk with y'all today. Are you able to see my presentation just fine?
We are.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm going to kick us off with just talking about CWD for folks who are here who may not have as much of a background on the disease. We're going to talk about what it is and then some of the symptoms that you might observe in cervids. And then I'm going to kick it off to Kevin later after I discuss our Alabama, kind of where we're at in Alabama with CWD. And Kevin will kick it off for Georgia. So I'm excited for this. It's a good kind of collaboration here, and you're getting to see what it's like across both of our states. So getting started with what is CWD, or chronic wasting disease. This is a disease that's fatal 100% of the time. It's contagious and it's neurodegenerative. It's in this class of diseases called transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, or TSEs. You may be familiar with scrapie in sheep and goats, and mad cow disease, or BSC, in cattle. Those are also TSEs, which are caused by prions. And so that's why they're in this category of TSE. There's actually a human form of a TSE as well, called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans. And really what this is, a prion is a misfolded protein. You can see at the graphic at the bottom, there's a normal form of a prion, and then there's an infectious form where it misfolds. And that essentially is what causes the disease. It can cause other prions to misfold within the body. And kind of where you get that name, the spongiform encephalopathy. Spongiform, essentially those prions get into the central nervous system in the brain, can cause essentially holes forming in the brain, which is the spongiform, like a sponge. And then encephalopathy is a fancy way of saying brain swelling, or trauma to the brain. So that's kind of in a wrap up quick summary there of what CWD is and what causes it. But again, I'd like to stress, these are transmissible, untreatable, and fatal. All prion diseases, including CWD, which affects cervids. And specifically, we're going to be talking about in Alabama today, white-tailed deer. So what can it look like if a deer has CWD? So these are clinical signs that you would see towards later stages of infection. Typically, this is, once a deer gets originally exposed to an infectious prion, in the average time is about 1.5 to 2 years where they're going to be, showing symptoms and having that active infection. So at the later stages, typically this is only going to last for maybe 2 to 3 months, and maybe sooner if that these symptoms may basically cause an animal to maybe be more likely to get hunted or hit by a car or anything like that. But it's very possible to see a deer with CWD having these symptoms. For one, the top left, having excessive drooling, being near water and excessively drinking and urinating, just having overall abnormal behavior where they're less fearful of people, being out in the middle of the day, standing in a field, just acting weird, pretty much. Drooping posture, like what you see in the bottom left, and then overall loss of body condition. That name, chronic wasting disease, essentially wasting away. That's kind of where the name came from. So these are, again, the symptoms that you can see at the later stages of infection, but not all deer with CWD look like this. A lot of the deer that we see that have CWD look like these right here. They, look perfectly healthy, but during that time, they can be infected with CWD and shedding those prions. It's like I mentioned before, that incubation period is very long. It's an extended period compared to some other diseases you might look at. So it makes it a little bit more complex when you're thinking about this disease dynamics and how they're able to spread those infectious prions. I like to stress that, a lot of people will say, well, my deer didn't look sick, but really there's no way to tell until you get that deer tested whether or not it had CWD. Because, this last season we had, which I'll get into a little bit more, we had additional CWD positives, and I put my hands on almost every deer that we had that was positive, and I would not have been able to tell if that was a CWD positive deer. They looked like these in this picture here. So getting into transmission, I mentioned before, once they are exposed to the deer, that incubation period, but here's, how do they even get exposed to it to begin with? The prions can be pretty much transmitted through several routes. The oral to nasal route is accepted to be the primary route of transmission. So, deer are social critters, transmitting prions, nose to nose, is considered to be that primary route. However, there's also been a lot of studies that show that prions can exist in the environment. It can also be expelled from animals through their urine, feces, or other tissues that can then go in the environment and affect a deer in what we would call an indirect transmission. So it's not deer to deer, but it's in that environment that they shared. And there's also this kind of third potential transmission from mother to offspring that we call vertical transmission. And this requires really some further study, but there could be a potential for infectious prions to pass from mother to fawn. So since we're, talking about transmission, this is a question that comes up a lot about zoonotic transmission, and that's really just a fancy way of saying animal to human transmission. To date, there have been no reported cases of CWD infection in people. Since this disease was first discovered, really back in 1967 is when it was first detected in a mule deer facility in Colorado, to now, there has been that, potential for it to cross that deer or cervid to human barrier, and that has not been demonstrated yet. So all the research that has been done shows that there's this really strong species barrier between cervids and people. However, there is somewhat of a question mark there of whether down the line that could change, or, with further research, maybe we can find out down the road that may affect human health. And we're here as wildlife management agencies. We are not public health agencies, so we always point to what our public health agencies recommend. And currently, the Centers for Disease Control, they recommend that hunters have their animals tested before eating any meat, and that they do not consume meat from a CWD positive deer. And I included their URL there if you'd like to read more about it on CDC's website, but They recommend that. And so I always point folks who have any concerns about that to their resources there. And always like to touch on that because that's a question that we have come up. In the media, a lot of the times, this is considered a zombie deer disease. And when you think zombie, you think of this picture that I like to include on this slide. But as far as we know, eating, it's not going to result in that, but that's what the CDC recommends currently. And I always like to include just one slide and talk about it really briefly about hemorrhagic disease in deer. And the reason why is because some of those symptoms that I showed you before about the late stage of infection of CWD can look very similar to hemorrhagic disease. And we're kind of getting into the months where we're going to be seeing deer potentially having HD. This is a disease that's seasonal, so typically it occurs in late summer and early fall. And this is actually caused by two different types of viruses, either epizootic hemorrhagic disease or blue tongue. And these are transmitted by biting flies or midges. So typically, once you have your first freeze, those midges die off, and you're not going to be having this virus transmitting anymore throughout the hunting season. But this is something we typically see in deer in the summertime, and I like to include it because someone may be seeing a deer that has hemorrhagic disease and think, oh, that those symptoms look very similar to CWD, but it's actually HD. It's a different disease. So there could be a little bit of a confusion there because those symptoms like excessive salivation, loss of appetite, basically abnormal behavior, not being very wary of people. And typically you find them near water when they're dead. And then during the hunting season, if a deer has recovered from hemorrhagic disease, you can see some of these abnormalities like sloughed hooves during hunting season. But I like to put this here again because of those symptoms that can be very similar. But the biggest thing I'd like to stress here is that unlike CWD, hemorrhagic disease is a recoverable disease, so a deer can recover from HD and essentially build up an immunity and be able to fight it later on in life as well. So I like to put that in there, especially since it's July, we're starting to get into HD season, just so you are aware. All right, so let's get back to CWD. I like to show this graphic from USGS. This is showing the changes in distribution from 2000 to 2023 with CWD. As I mentioned before, it was discovered for the first time in 1967 in a mule deer facility out in Colorado. And as you can see, these, different kinds of categories. So essentially you have your gray shaded areas are in free ranging or wild populations. And then you have those red and yellow are from captive facilities. So really, I like to show this because it kind of shows the progression. So beforehand, a lot of our states in the Southeast thought, okay, this is a Western disease. We don't really need to be worried about it right now. It seems to be contained to the West. And then we started seeing it changing in distribution. And when it got into Wisconsin, it got, east of the Mississippi River, a lot of the states in the eastern side of North America started to think about, doing some monitoring for CWD and, incorporating this in our management. So I'm going to let this run through one more time just so you can kind of see, and then you'll see, at the end of this graphic in, 2022, 2023, we see Alabama pop up. And, I'll be, of course, touching a little bit more about our current status here in Alabama. So this is our current global CWD distribution as of April 2025. That was the last time this map was updated. So you can see we have in North America, 36 states, 4 Canadian provinces where CWD has been detected. And then this map also breaks it down, of course, by captive deer CWD positives and wild, apologies. So 35 states and 4 Canadian provinces where it's been detected now in the wild. So, why should we care about CWD? As I had, detailed so far in this presentation, it's a fatal disease for deer, fatal 100% of the time. And once it's in an area, because of that transmission that I discussed about, potential environmental transmission, this is a long-term, battle associated with CWD. Once it's in an area, it's very hard to eradicate it. So once it's there, and there's so much monitoring and management that we can do from there. And long term, that can affect deer population dynamics and the way that we are able to manage for white-tailed deer. And I'm saying white-tailed deer because that's where we're at. That's where we're our main concern, cervids. But if you expand even further, elk, mule deer, etc. This third bullet point here of the potential to impact hunting heritage. If you have a change in deer population dynamics and you're having fewer, older bucks with bigger racks, that might, affect people's want and drive to go out and hunt. It removes that potential trophy out there. With less people hunting, there's negative impacts on local economies and also conservation efforts. It's no secret that hunting is what drives a lot of the conservation efforts in North America. It's the main funding source for a lot of our work. So if we have people who, aren't as interested in going out and hunting because the white-tailed deer population is not thriving because of CWD, then that can really affect a lot of things. And, lastly, I have to put this bullet point, possible human health concerns. There's a little bit of a question mark there. I mentioned before there's a strong species barrier, but there's also, more research needs to be done on it. So there's something that to consider as well. So I'm going to move into to what it's like in Alabama, and specifically, why we care about CWD. I mentioned all of those bullet points of why we should all collectively care about CWD. But for us here in Alabama, our mission for our division is to manage, protect, conserve, and enhance the wildlife and aquatic resources of Alabama for the sustainable benefit of the people here. And as I mentioned before, CWD, very serious disease that affects white-tailed deer here in our state. So this is something that's, top priority for us to continue to monitor and manage this disease. So with that being said, we started our original surveillance plan back in 2002 to 2003. This lines up pretty much with what I mentioned before, Wisconsin getting CWD for the first time, first detection there, and that triggered a lot of our eastern states to start looking at that as well. So we, during that hunting season, started to collect samples. This was, opportunistically where we could, where hunters volunteered samples. And you can see, up until 2018, we were collecting a couple hundred deer every year, maybe close to 1,000 on some of the years. And then what really changed things was in 2018, Mississippi and Tennessee detected their first positives, and we went to reevaluating the way that we were doing surveillance, and we actually developed a full-on plan. So this is the Strategic Surveillance and Response Plan. This is adaptive, so it's constantly changing as we're getting new research and also new findings. And this is available on our website, and I'm going to have that website link later if you'd like to read through it. It's available to read, and it's actually one that we're probably going to be updating soon with some recent legislative changes that we've had. We're going to be updating our plan. So like I said, it's adaptive and it's constantly being updated. So how this works is we have basically these statewide sampling goals that's set. So that currently is 7,720 points. You might be thinking, okay, what does that mean? What is a point? This is the system that we moved to. Essentially speaking, a buck, an adult buck would count for 3 points, whereas year and a half doe might be 1 point. So it basically ascribes a point due to the level of risk that a deer might have for having CWD. So we have these points that are designated for the entire state. And then we divide those points into our 67 counties that we have here in Alabama. And that's our quota that we aim to reach and then exceed is the goal always. So this has resulted since 2002 to pretty much present day. I believe this value I calculated at the beginning of June. So since then, we have over 31,522 samples that we've collected from free-ranging deer since our original start date of sampling. So this is little graphic here shows kind of the process for how we get testing done on our wild deer. So we get samples from roadkill, from hunter harvested deer, that's actually how we get most of our samples. That's 92% of our samples come from hunters. And we are eternally grateful for them offering up samples so that we're able to monitor and surveillance for CWD. But we can also get them from roadkill, some of our DMAP, which I'm going to get into. That's our deer management cooperators, which are our landowners who hunt deer and then provide those samples to us. So there's a few different routes we can be getting those deer. We collect medial retropharyngeal lymph nodes and then send those off for testing at our ag and industries in the state. They do what's called an ELISA test, and if that is non-negative, meaning that there was something that flagged that there could be prion, infection to prions, then it goes to NVSL, which is the National Veterinary Services Laboratory in Iowa, and they conduct an IHC test. This is considered the gold standard for CWD, so that will detect whether it's there or not. Whether the result's positive or negative, the hunter is going to know, and I'll show you in a bit how our process for that works. And if it's, negative from the front of ELISA testing, then the hunter knows, and we send that information on over. So where are we now at with CWD? So in January of 2022, we detected our first hunter harvested positive. This was through our normal, voluntary sampling. Hunter had submitted a sample, and this was positive in Lauderdale County, which is our furthest northwest county in Alabama. So that was back in 2022, and this was a buck. And then currently where we're at now, this past season in the 24-25 season, we detected our first CWD positive deer in Colbert County. And this basically triggered our plan, which again, the SSRP is our adaptive plan. If there is a case, we will draw a 10-mile radius around that, and it will bring in the next county if it's within that 10-mile radius. So that brought in Franklin County to the south. And we have within our full zone, we have our high risk and our buffer zone. And essentially this just means that there's different regulations that apply to the buffer zone, but all of the CWD management zone is included in Lauderdale, Colbert, and Franklin counties. So where we're currently at now, we started with that one in January 2022. We currently have 12 CWD positives cumulatively since that time. This past season, we had added 7 more positive deer, the one buck in Colbert County, and then the remaining 6 were all does in Lauderdale County. And this is kind of what you see happen with this disease. So typically, your bucks are going to be the ones dispersing out during the rutting season. They go further distances, and a CWD positive buck then may pop up in a new area. And then once that disease has been there and is persisting for quite a bit, then you see a lot more does carrying it on. So that's kind of what we're seeing now in Lauderdale County. Our original positives were bucks, and then now we're getting more does. So this is something that we kind of expect to see with comparing it to other states who've been dealing with CWD for far longer. So this is currently where we're at. We are now gearing up for the 25-26 hunting season. Our CWD sampling season, however, starts from July 1. So we're currently in our new season of CWD testing, and that will run until the end of June of next year. So right now, we're working on preparing for the upcoming hunting season and getting our CWD sampling lined up. If you are hunting in Alabama or know someone who is and would like to get your deer tested, the first step to do so is, at this point, hopefully everyone has our Outdoor Alabama app. It makes it way easier. You can have your hunting license on there. You can, if you're hunting public lands, you can check into the WMAs through that app. But you can game check your deer right on the app. That's step one. You have to game check it in Alabama. That is for deer and turkey. That's, a requirement to do within the first, I believe it's 24 hours. You have to game check your deer. And then that's step one. Next is actually getting the deer to us. So there's a few different options. If you are up in Franklin, Colbert, or Lauderdale County in our CMZ, we will be having mandatory weekends where you are required to bring your deer in for testing. And these will be at mobile sampling stations. We have these set up typically outside of processors and taxidermists, or other local areas that are accessible for folks to be able to get to. We also have any of our wildlife management area check stations. A biologist will be there that can help you get a sample pulled from your deer. And we also have a list of, on our website, we have a map of freezer locations. So at these freezers, all you would need to do is take the head of your deer and cut it off and put that in the freezer with all your information. And we collect those from the freezers and get them to the lab and get you those results. I will say, if any of those options don't work for you, you can always reach out to any of our district offices or up here at headquarters, and we are able to work with you. So the thing that comes up sometimes, if you're not wanting to get rid of your head because you want to Euro mount your deer, but you're, processing it yourself, you're not able to take it to a check station, you can call our district offices and one of our biologists can either meet with you or have you come to the office and we can collect the sample that way. So there's always a way we can work with you to get that done. And then step 3 here is to get your results. So we actually, within the last couple years, started initiating this process where we have it go through the app. So we still will give you a deer sample number so that if you want to go to the website at the bottom linked there, you can actually look up the results from that 6-digit number that we give you. But since it's associated with your game check, it will actually show up in your app now. So it'll say either CWD not detected, CWD results pending, or CWD detected. But if CWD was detected in your deer, we will give you a call first. You will probably not, I can actually say you will definitely not see that in your app first. I will be giving you a call first to let you know, and then it'll, load up in there. So I'm just going to briefly discuss these so we have enough time for Kevin and for questions. But this is also available. We have it in our digest every year, but also it's available online of the regulations that we have and the rules for our CMZ. Essentially, those who are hunting deer in our CWD management zone aren't able to take deer out of the CWD management zone unless it has basically all of these bullet points here, unless you completely debone it, leave, any brain materials or any parts of the central nervous system in the CWD management zone. You can take out clean skull plates, raw capes, finished taxidermy products or whatnot. So if you happen to be hunting in Lauderdale, Colbert, or Franklin counties in Alabama, those regulations are on our website. So you can always look that up. If you have any questions, you can always contact me as well. I'm going to have my information at the end. So this is where our website is. It's outdooralabama.com/CWD-info. We actually also have a newsletter. So if we have an update when we release our mandatory weekends for the season, all of that will actually go out through a newsletter. So you can sign up for email updates on CWD on our website here. And then I also like to mention this for anyone who maybe isn't a hunter or you just see something that you'd like to report about deer on your property or somewhere. So this is our report a sick deer form. You can do this and this comes to me and that way we can investigate. We actually had a situation where in this past season, one of the deer that tested positive for CWD in Lauderdale County was reported to us and we were able to go out and the deer was acting funny, was acting symptomatic, and we were able to euthanize that deer and get the samples from it, and it ended up having CWD. So anytime that you're seeing any symptomatic deer or anything that's suspicious, even if it's not CWD, could be something else, please report it here, and that way we're able to follow up on it. And briefly, I'd like to mention what I talked about it a little bit before, but our Deer Management Assistance Program. Some of the folks on this call may be landowners who are interested in this. So we have our wildlife freshwater fisheries biologists provide technical assistance for landowners through this program. It is a no-cost program. And essentially, a biologist will come out and assess your property, talk with you about the goals, whether it's that you want to see healthier deer overall, whether you want to manage for bucks with big racks, whether you just want to harvest a few more does. They can utilize some site-specific harvest data that you have on your property and work with you to get a plan. And you become a cooperator where you send in data to our biologists about ages of deer, sex that are being harvested, so they can help further develop that plan. And I mentioned before, no cost, and through it you get some education as well and those recommendations on management. So we try and any properties that we've had where they've detected CWD, we try and work with folks to help them manage as well. And so this is a really great program. I encourage anyone who has property in Alabama, if you'd like to get connected with our technical assistance biologist. This slide here has their information. I can leave this up for a second if someone wants to take a picture or write down a number. But we in our division, we have basically different districts. So whether you're, in the Northeast or Northwest, whatever county that you're in, that would be your biologist that I listed here on this slide. And I can also get this information out too. I don't know if Katie's going to do a follow-up email, but either way, I can get this to you if you need some contacts. And so with that, we're saving questions for the end, but this is my contact information. If anyone has questions or wants to get connected with either DMAP or has CWD related questions, please feel free to contact me. And that's all I'll have. And I'm going to kick it off now to Kevin so he can talk about Georgia's program.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Thank you, Olivia, with the great background that she gave. My slide show is a little bit shorter, just really talking about exactly what we're doing in Georgia. As Olivia mentioned, my name is Kevin Rose. I am the DMAP supervisor for the state and the assistant state deer biologist. So I am neck deep in chronic wasting disease management. See if it's going to progress for us. There we go. Similar to Alabama, we use a risk-based model for our surveillance, using points, 3 points for a mature buck, lower points for younger animals, no points for fawns. And we assign those points for our quotas to the counties that have the highest risk. The map on the right is samples since 2019, but we have been sampling since 2002, just like Alabama, after Wisconsin had their first detection. So we collect samples and have since 2002 across the state. More samples in counties where risk is determined to be higher through a risk management model that is actually designed by Cornell University. Other steps that we have done to help try and keep it out of the state. Unfortunately, we do have it now in Georgia, but prohibit the importation of live deer and intact cervids. And then, of course, anybody who breaks that is investigated and all deer are tested. All of those have always come back negative, but we continue to do that. But despite our best efforts, chronic wasting disease was discovered in Georgia this last year. Our first test was found through that routine testing of using our surveillance program. It was a hunter harvested 2.5-year-old buck harvested on the Lanier-Berrien County line, which you can see in that map, that point of Lanier County where it touches Berrien County. It's right up by that point and right on the line is where that first deer was harvested. We did have a second detection during what we call cluster sampling, which I will talk about in the next slides. but we did have a second detection. It was 400 yards away from the original detection. That was a 4.5-year-old buck, and on the same property as the original detection. We use a 5-mile radius around each positive to determine what we call the CWD management area, or the CMA. So any county that touches a 5-mile radius from a positive deer is considered part of the CMA. You can see on the map there's a 5-mile radius is the outside circle around the positives. It touches Lanier and Berrien counties. No surprise, the positives are right on those county lines. So those are the 2 counties that are in our CMA. So cluster sampling, I mentioned it in the last slide. What is cluster sampling? Essentially, it is focusing hunting pressure, the existing hunting pressure, in the area and on the deer that are most likely to be positive. So if a deer is detected as positive, then we work with the hunters and the landowners in that area to try and direct the existing hunting pressure to that specific location. You know, if it's a doe, then she has the most interaction with her family group. And so we want to target and try to sample that family group through cluster sampling. This selectively targets the deer most likely to have contact and therefore are most likely to be positive. This is not designed to, in fact, it's intentionally designed to not greatly reduce the deer population in any given area. So we're very focused on targeting just the deer right around that positive and not conducting, deer population reductions in the CMA as a whole. This year, in our last regulation cycle, we implemented a rule that is the carcass disposal rule. So versus having an area where you can't move the deer carcass out of the CMA, we are using a statewide rule that dictates how you dispose of the carcass. Now, this is designed to make sure that other wild deer cannot access a deer carcass, because if it was positive, it could infect another deer through that indirect route that Olivia did discuss. So how can you dispose of a deer carcass after hunting? You can leave it on the property where the deer was killed. This is because the deer do shed the prions. There is that environmental contamination. And so if a deer is positive, it's harvested on a property, that property is contaminated. So leaving the carcass on that property is okay. You can take the meat off and leave the bones, the head there on that property. You can use one of our commercial deer processors. In the state of Georgia, that we have something called the Dead Animal Disposal Act. It is a Department of Agriculture state law, and commercial deer processors have to abide by that law. And so they are disposing of their carcasses appropriately. You can use a permitted solid waste facility. It can go out with your household trash, because then it is buried, it's behind a fence, wild deer can't gain access to it. It is a way to reduce the risk if that deer were positive, to reduce the spread of prions. There are some other methods, including deep burial, which would be at least 3 feet under the surface. So, think a grave, not just throwing some dirt and leaves on top of it. Incineration. Most hunters don't have access to incinerators. This does not mean a burn pile or a burn barrel in the backyard. This is a commercial incinerator, or other methods that are approved by the Dead Animal Disposal Act. Feeding and baiting. This is probably the hottest topic with chronic wasting disease in the state of Georgia. In the state of Georgia, it is legal to feed and bait deer. And we are not banning feeding or baiting deer in the CMA or anywhere else in the state. The reason for this is we were actually very fortunate. In 2024, we had a survey of our hunters and landowners related to chronic wasting disease, different management techniques that they would accept or that they would reject. And based on that survey of our constituents, a ban bait would not be supported. So instead of fighting with our constituents, because we do need our hunters and our landowners, we are working with them. We are not working against them. We need them to continue hunting. We need them to submit samples. We are not banning or restricting the use of bait or feed. However, we do have some recommendations if you are going to bait to reduce risk, and you can see them listed here. It is to broadcast the feed over a larger area. Think about a food plot versus a pile of corn. Avoid the gravity feeders and the trough feeders where deer stick their heads in the exact same spot over and over again. Move those feeding places around the landscape. Don't leave them in one spot. And again, that's because of the environmental contamination. Deer shed the infective prion in their saliva, in their urine, in their feces. And so if there's one location that they're coming to for years and we're concentrating deer in that area, it may increase the risk of another deer becoming infected from that contaminated area. And then also we recommend limit feeding to when you are actively hunting. So if you want to use bait while hunting, you can do that. But we do ask that you consider to not do year-round feeding. CWD testing in Georgia. So as Olivia mentioned, the CDC recommends that you test any deer from a known CWD area and not consume the meat if it does come back positive. So in the CMA, Berrien and Lanier counties, we are encouraging all deer to be tested. We are prioritizing those samples, so they're going to go to the lab and be tested first before samples from other places in the state. And as far as locations where you can have that done, we have drop-off freezers in and around the CMA, very similar to Alabama, where you take the head off, leave 4 inches of neck, provide the information, put it in the freezer. We come by and pick it up, take it to the lab, submit the samples. And we're also working with cooperating deer processors and taxidermists. So many of our processors and taxidermists across the state are collecting samples for us, collecting the heads, and then transmitting them to us. So you can work with one of those cooperating processors or taxidermists. Outside the CMA, testing is available, but it's not something that we're encouraging everybody to have every deer tested. The results are not prioritized. So it may take up to months to receive your samples. Anytime we get samples from the CMA, they're going to jump to the front of the list to run through the test. So it will take longer to get those samples in. But the way that you have your deer tested is, again, working with one of those cooperating processors and taxidermists. Now, all the locations, the freezers, the cooperating processors and taxidermists will be on an interactive map on our CWD website, which you see here, and there are multiple times that I show this link throughout the presentation. It's not currently up there because we're not actively seeking samples from hunters. It's not deer season yet, but it will be up there before deer season starts, which is September 13th is the beginning of archery season in Georgia. How will you receive your test results? Just like Alabama, if there's a positive, you're going to receive a direct phone call from the deer program. It'll be myself or the state deer biologist, Charlie Kilmaster, will pick up the phone, call that hunter. We're going to want to know information about the hunt, where it was, and that's going to be the way that somebody with a positive result is going to find out. But the results will also be emailed to the hunters through the email address that we have on file through your license. And then there's going to be a dashboard, again, on that same CWD website where you can look up your results using your confirmation number or your phone number on record so that you can check those results. But again, that's just going to be really showing those negatives until or pending results, that the results are not in yet. If there is a positive, it's going to be a phone call, direct phone call from us first. So takeaways for CWD, we have been planning for this since 2002, when Wisconsin had their first positive detection. Almost every state in the Southeast began their surveillance, their response plans. Our response plan has evolved over 22 years. We were the 36th state to confirm a positive, so we've seen what the other 35 states have done, and our plan continues to evolve. It is adaptive, just as Alabama's is. CWD management will be conducted locally and in cooperation with landowners and hunters. We are not coming in and having agency sharpshooters come in onto properties. We're not drastically trying to reduce the population. This is a collaborative effort where we are working with our constituents. CWD is likely here to stay, and as Olivia mentioned, this is an ongoing long-term battle. This is not going to be a quick fix. We're now going to be living with chronic wasting disease. And Olivia mentioned the Deer Management Assistance Program in Alabama. I am the supervisor for the Deer Management Assistance Program, also called DMAP, here in Georgia. Our program's a little bit different. We provide site-specific deer and turkey habitat management and harvest management recommendations to private landowners, hunt clubs, leasees, and a few public properties. Our program is a fee-based program with 4 different levels. The lowest level is $200. You get a biologist come out to your property, spend the day with you, a written management plan, and for $200, that's an excellent deal. But all the way up the top level, level 4 is $1,000 to enroll. It includes more services. But our services include habitat management plan, harvest recommendations, annual site visit from a biologist dedicated to you and your property and your part of the state. Level 4 actually includes 2 site visits a year. And then what we call harvest flexibility. Harvest flexibility, in short, is our ability to grant exceptions to the regulations. We can issue additional antlerless tags, management buck tags. There's some steps, some hoops to jump through to get management buck tags. Antler point restriction relief. So we do have some counties where you have to have, a buck has to have a 15-inch outside spread or 4 points on a side to be a legal buck. On a site-specific, property-specific basis, we can remove those in one of our 10 counties that have antler point restrictions. And we can change either sex days to, or change buck only days to either sex days. That really only applies to our mountain counties. All of that harvest flexibility has to be biologically justified. The enabling legislation that allows us to do that states that. How we biologically justify harvest flexibility is I have to have 2 points of information. One is harvest data for every deer that's harvested on the property. It's weights, jawbones for aging. If it's a buck, it's antler characteristics, sex. That tells us something about the health of the deer on your property. And then the other thing we need is a camera survey run following the protocols that we provide that gives us demographic information about a density estimate, an estimate of the buck-doe ratio, and an estimate of recruitment, how many fawns per does are on that property. So those 2 pieces of information together allow us to make science-based recommendations for your harvest recommendations. And if necessary, we can use those harvest flexibility tools. I'm going to leave this. This is my last slide, and I'm going to leave it up for a little bit. There's a lot of information here. The QR code does take you to the CWD website, which is that first link. If you have questions or concerns about chronic wasting disease, the email cwd@dnr.ga.gov. That email address is monitored by myself and the rest of the deer program. So that will give you direct access to one of our deer biologists to answer questions specific to chronic wasting disease. If you are a Georgia resident or not a Georgia resident, maybe hunt in Georgia, and you have input on our regulations, the gm.comments@dnr.ga.gov. That email address is monitored by one of our assistant chiefs. Every email is read. So if you have comments or recommendations, that's the email address to use to make sure it goes straight to our assistant chief that does coordinate our regulations. The DMAP website is listed there, as well as my phone number. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Olivia. If anybody has any questions, please drop them in the Q&A, or if you'd like to ask it yourself, you can click the raise hand button and I can give you permission to talk. But we'll give you all a few minutes to see if we have any questions come in. And in the meantime, I will be sending out an email with the link to this webinar and contact information as well. We have one question. Does either Alabama or Georgia monitor hemorrhagic disease the same way they monitor CWD?
Well, I'm unmuted, so I'll just let you know what we do. So you don't monitor it the same way where we go around and test every deer for it. Deer that end up dying from hemorrhagic disease, HD, as Olivia said, that's blue tongue or epizootic hemorrhagic disease. We just lump them together and consider it HD. Um, Deer that are found dead in late summer or early fall, most of the time near water, and a lot of the times they're tipped up. They died, they look healthy because the virus killed them very quickly. So any reports like that we receive, especially if it's more than one deer on a property, we want to try and get a sample from that. It's a spleen and lung sample. We send those to SCWDS, which is the cooperative for all southeastern states for disease diagnostics. It's based out of Athens, and they monitor HD across the entire country because there's different serotypes, different types of viruses, strains of viruses. So it could be HD serotype 5. It could be blue tongue serotype 7. Anyway, there's different varieties of it, and they monitor it across the entire country. So we submit those samples to them. Also, we ask from our DMAP cooperators to look for those sloughing hooves. So Olivia showed the picture, it's top left, where the hooves were cracked. That's an indication that the deer had the disease and survived it. And so we ask them to record that in their information, and then we track it that way as well.
And I'll say Kevin summarized that perfectly, and we do the exact same thing pretty much here in Alabama. We contribute those results to SCWDS, to their study every year, and we record any instances during the hunting season. If we're seeing sloughed hooves at our check stations or hunters are reporting that to us, and then we'll collect during the late summer, early fall as well, any deer that have passed away from it. So that's why I say if you see anything like that on your property, please let us know because we are definitely interested in collecting those samples.
Thank you all. We have another one. As CWD becomes more widespread in both states, how do they expect management to change? Kevin, if you want to, if you have anything.
Yeah, so CWD spread is probably inevitable. We're going to do everything we can to reduce risk. But if CWD is detected somewhere else, it's the same management strategy. Cluster sampling, some states call it targeted removals, is really the only tool that's been shown to be effective at reducing prevalence rates. The percent of deer that are sick in a general area is the prevalence rate. And so removing those deer that are most likely to be positive is one way to reduce the risk of spread. One less deer that's transmitting it to other deer. And so that would increase across the state. The carcass disposal ban is in place statewide, so that's not going to change for us.
Yeah, and as Kevin said, we want to work with our hunters and our landowners. We really don't want CWD to change the environment for hunting. We recognize this is a very serious disease, and like Kevin said, it's most likely going to be here, and most likely going to spread. The best we can do is slow the spread as much as possible and prevent, as Kevin said as well, having as many deer concentrated together, which is why, we put regulations in place as well. Here in Alabama, we do have, I kind of skipped over it during my presentation, but we do have a bait and feed ban in our CWD management zone. So Lauderdale, Colbert, and Franklin County are not able to bait or feed for deer. So we try as much as we can with management of, preventing congregation of deer together, preventing the potential spread of prions, as well through like disposal of carcasses. So I think long term, it's going to, the ability that we have to manage CWD, we can, do the best we can to try and limit and slow down that spread, and, manage deer as best as we can with this disease, and also pay attention to things coming up, new research, new technologies that are out there.
Thank you all. And we have one more. Do we know if fire, for example, prescribed burns, has any impact on the prevalence of shed CWD prions in the environment?
Unfortunately, the prion is very, very stable, as Olivia described. In order to destroy it with heat, think pasteurization, you get to a very specific temperature and it will destroy it, or you can hold it at a lower temperature for a long period of time to destroy it. That instantaneous temperature is reported to be 1,832 degrees Fahrenheit. Prescribed fires don't get that hot. 900 degrees for several hours can destroy it. Prescribed fires don't sit in one place for that long or get to 900 degrees. So no, it's not going to denature or destroy that infectious prion. One thing that it could do is these prions can be sucked up into a plant. We don't really know if they have been detected in plants where they have been sucked up. We don't know if that is an infectious dose, if a deer could actually get sick from eating a plant that has pulled it up, but it would take it out of the plants because it would destroy the plants and put it back in the soil, but that's not going to have a long-term effect. Prescribed fire does a lot of great things for us. It's great habitat management. I write a lot of habitat management recommendations for deer and turkey. And especially if you care about turkeys, prescribed fire is really important on our landscape in the Southeast, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, the whole Southeast. It also will reduce tick loads. Ticks don't survive very well with prescribed fire, but from chronic wasting disease, no, unfortunately not.
Yeah, I'll add to that. In addition to they're very stable prions are. So, disinfectants, heat, there's not a lot that can easily degenerate the prion. So it makes it really difficult when, as we were both mentioning earlier, once it's in an area, it's most likely there to stay potentially in the environment, because it's so difficult to fully remove the prions.
Thank you all. And I believe that is the last of our questions. And that is right on time. So thank you all both so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Like I said earlier, I'll send out an email with the link to the presentation and contact info. But I hope you all have a great rest of your day and hope to see you all in our next webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks.
Thank you.